Really wanted to check in with a bloke called Daniel Teng. He is a director of the Epoch Times. Now, the Epoch Times is a truth teller about the way that China works, and is a truth teller particularly into the Australian community of Chinese descent who may well have been more traditionally used to reading Chinese language media in this country that, as we showed you earlier, Australian intelligence officials believe has got some pretty obvious connections back to Beijing, which means, of course, they end up parroting the propaganda. And, of course, there's WeChat and so much more. So I wanted to get Daniel on the telly now. Daniel, nice to talk to you, mate. A lot has happened since we talked last time. So what do you think about this report about how the local Chinese media, which is being read by tens of thousands of people, is really parroting Beijing on Beijing's behalf?
Well, it's actually no real surprise, unfortunately. I mean, it's been one of the worst-kept secrets in the Chinese language mediascape in Australia for almost 20 years now. But what the report really does is it actually establishes a foundation for our intelligence services, and I think just for public awareness, to really understand the full extent of foreign interference in the Chinese language mediascape. So there's been a lot of investigations on this area in the last few years, but it's been really difficult to pin down specific smoking guns, we like to say. Now, in the Epoch Times, we've experienced probably 2 decades of CCP or Chinese Communist Party intimidation. And so what we've found over all these years is that intimidation, or the things that foreign interference tends to rely on, is very much operates in a grey zone. It's very difficult to find smoking guns. It's very difficult to pin down very conclusive evidence of what's occurring. And I think this report really does help give us a bit of a leverage or a foundation for future action.
Now, there are 1.2 million Australians of Chinese descent, and they are our friends amongst us, and they're as Australian as everybody else, right? But what are the circulation of some of these publications, the newspapers? Are they read by 10,000 people, 100,000 people? Give us an idea about the penetration of the influence into parts of the community.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question. Maybe I'll start by saying that every major capital city in Australia has publications or online publications which toe a very strong pro-Beijing line. Now, Sydney and Melbourne have got a larger amount of these sort of publications and news websites, and that's due to the longer history of the Chinese community living in Sydney and Melbourne. Now, in terms of actual numbers, I think there was an event last year in China, which was hosted by the United Front Work Department, which is the foremost infiltration body for Beijing, overseas infiltration body. Now, this event was really targeting overseas Chinese language media. And last year in 2019, I believe from Australia, over 30 delegates representing Chinese language media outlets flew over there. So that's not a small number of media outlets that would appear to support Beijing. And another thing worth mentioning is that the influence of the digital landscape, which is something you mentioned a bit earlier about WeChat. What we found is the print side of things, the print circulation numbers, they're quite stable, and they aren't obviously not growing as fast, but what's really of concern nowadays is really the online side of things. And with WeChat, pro-Beijing media have been able to leverage WeChat, the social media algorithms, to really generate enormous followings. So just to give you one example, there is a website in Sydney that was featured in the report that came out in the Sydney Morning Herald today called Sydney Today, incidentally. It's estimated to have close to 1 million followers per month. So wow. That's an incredible number for just one media outlet.
Yeah, and there's things like We Sydney with 400,000 subscribers and plenty of others. So I want to put this in. I mean, this is a show that talks a lot about politics and also just tell some ugly truths about politics too. Okay. Now again, no community moves as one giant this, that, and the other, right? But if the media diet of tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people is going to have in it overt propaganda, and very obviously I believe that China's going to try to sort of personalise that the problem is the Prime Minister, the problem is the government. In terms of voting blocks, do you believe that there could be consequences between general messages about Australia, specific messages about politicians that can actually lead to votes moving at a federal election?
That's a very interesting question. I think what's important for the federal government to do, and the steps are already beginning, is to actually provide a separate voice to counter what is Beijing's very, very strong influence campaign. So the Immigration Minister, Alan Tudge, has been holding regular press conferences with multicultural media since probably mid this year. And our security and intelligence services have been, you can say, warning about foreign interference in our multicultural communities. So it's these efforts which are probably more critical to providing a separate voice to what is already coming out of pro-Beijing publications. On the whole, Chinese community, the 1.2 million, is a very diverse community, admittedly. So there are those who have a critical view of the Chinese Communist Party, and there are those who support the Chinese Communist Party, and there are those who will probably sit in the middle. And what's probably more critical now is really putting out a voice that can counteract what is a very strong and powerful influence campaign from Beijing.
Yeah, and that's why the digital stuff's really important, because WeChat, literally, Beijing can turn on and off. It's all part of how the game plays. Really fascinating to talk to you, Daniel. How can people get, apart from websites, is there physical ways people can read the Epoch Times?
Absolutely. So the epochtimes.com is our English language website, and you can access that online. And there's obviously options to subscribe as well. Paul, if you'd love to subscribe, feel free to do so.
Glad.
And one of the great things now is our roots were grounded in independent reporting in the face of what's been happening with Beijing and its overseas influence campaigns. But what we've really done with our English publication in recent years is really tell the truth around the United States, particularly around the Trump presidency, and really shining a light on what's going on in the world, free of any media narratives, which has become more and more of a problem in recent years. And I think most people are now aware that the media, mainstream media, have their own agendas that they're trying to push onto people, and also to condition people to understand the world a certain way. So the Epoch Times wants to tell the truth, and that's really been our mission since we were established in 2000.
On that, we are unified. Thank you, mate. All the best.
Thank you.